with Randomness. With your host, the clergyman for the common man, Pastor Tim.
Well, like I said, today on Wrestling with Randomness and Conversations with Pastor Tim, I am excited because one of my personal passions, for some people, it's actually a guilty pleasure. It doesn't matter how you classify it. It's the world of professional wrestling. And it doesn't matter if you were a big fan back in the 1980s and you saw Hogan slam Andre, and then you watch the 1, 2, 3 and you celebrate it. It doesn't matter if you move forward, whether it's the Macho Man.
Hello, statement. Never do it, Slim Jim.
Or moving on into Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock.
How you doing? It doesn't matter how you're doing.
Every single time you saw your favorite wrestler win that championship or win that match in front of you, it was never just the wrestlers in the ring. There was always at least one other person known as the third man in the ring, and that is the referee. Today, for a wrestling conversation, I have with me a very special guest, Mr. Dave Miller, a man that goes by many names. Dave, thank you for joining me today, man.
Pastor Tim, thank you for having me on today.
Oh man,
I'm
you go
excited
by
to be
many
here.
names. You're Dave Miller, but some know you as Super Dave, most commonly Pondwater Dave. What do you want to go by, or what do you prefer?
I'm good with just Dave. Super Dave was a nickname that was given to me out of, I got attacked when I was younger, and I survived a gunshot to the head, and I had a little Superman tattoo on my arm. So I was nicknamed Super Dave by the doctors and nurses at Baylor Hospital in Dallas. So Super Dave's always followed me. But then we started doing Sad News Bears for Conrad Thompson on AFS. It was just our group chat. And we nicknamed ourselves. We started with the Think Tank, and then we transitioned to Sad News Bears because inevitably somebody always posted sad news in the group. But one day but I really I can't monetize Super Dave because it's already a trademark name. But it's a legitimate nickname that I've carried for 30 years. But one day Conrad told Tony Schiavone that he goes, that our friend Super Dave doesn't think he can get COVID because Tony's like, oh, really? He goes, well, no, he drinks pond water and eats hot Cheetos. Well, he said that I drink pond water because every picture that I post, I have a pond in my backyard. And I'm very, very proud of my pond.
Mm-hmm. I'm proud of you. You know that.
There's lots of pictures of it because it's beautiful. And that's where he got the pond at. And I deliver. I work for Frito-Lay. I deliver hot Cheetos for a living.
Dude, I love flaming hot Cheetos. This is going to be no problem.
Because through conversations, he'll always say, hey, what's your best item? And I'll say, hot Cheetos. And it blows his mind that does better than regular potato chips. So when you tell Conrad something, he gets just enough to use it against you later.
Yeah, and just in case you're listening to the Conrad, maybe you're not involved, but Dave and I know each other actually through another organization that is wrestling centric for those that may be listening that don't know, called Ad Free Shows. And Conrad Thompson is, I don't know, the CEO, but we call him the Pod Father. He has a lot of podcasts and hosts them and all that. And so when he's talking about Conrad, it's literally this guy who started this whole craze of wrestling podcasts. In my opinion, that's the guy who really launched it into the mainstream.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll just pretend like I'm Ricky Bobby. I don't know what to do with my hands.
I learned that when he gives you a nickname, that you can either lean into it, or if you show any resistance, it's relentless. So at that time, I decided, that's not bad. I'm going to lean into that. And Pondwater Dave was born at that moment.
And it's going on because the name, you host your own podcast. I mean, and we'll, mention it again even later on, but talking wrestling with Pondwater Dave. And that's been going for quite a while. And so you have been able to brand Pondwater Dave, and just about everybody that I know knows you as Pondwater Dave. And it's just taken off.
And I like that I can use that. I wanted to use that name as an umbrella for silliness, because there's so much silliness that goes along. And anybody that knows me knows that I like to joke and laugh all the time anyway. I'd like to think I have an incredible sense of humor. And so when I told Justin Davis and Amy Vaughn, my co-hosts, we were trying to come up with a name, and I was like, we got to put Pondwater Dave in there, but that will throw us, and not because I'm an egomaniac, just because then we can have an umbrella of silliness that when we get really silly, that it makes sense. And I didn't think I could make the Super Dave, and I really didn't want to do just referee Dave Miller and lean into that, because I wanted, that way we're just not nailed down to a certain topic every week. I mean, we go to indie wrestling, we can talk about television, we can talk about pop culture, we can talk about current wrestling, we can just talk about, or we can just, we can bring one of our friends on and just be silly for an hour and a half.
And that's one of the things, I've listened to your show and recommended, like I said, Talking Wrestling with Pondwater Dave. But one of the things that you have gotten involved in, because, how do you go from, all right, delivering, for Frito-Lay and things like that, but there's a whole nother side to you that is what I call the public side of your life and your career. And that is the area of professional wrestling. And for those that don't know, you have been a referee for quite some time, mainly on the indie circuit and doing things there. And we'll get into some of the highlights as we move along here. But Dave, can you tell me, a little bit about where you're based at and maybe your very first memories of professional wrestling? Because that's a big jump to say, I am going to go from fan into everything. But what got you hooked on wrestling?
Well, when I was a little kid, my mom introduced me to it because her grandfather used to take her, and I was maybe 5, 6 at the most, maybe 7, early 70s. She put it on it'd come on Saturday night. It'd come out really late Saturday night, and she showed it to me. This is my grandfather used to take me to watch. And my first memories were Ivan Putski, but he wasn't the jacked up 80s version yet. He was a muscle guy. I mean, he was a legit power lifter, wild hair, but he would act childlike. He'd bring toys to the ring, and the blackjacks would come out and break his toys. And then he would just go crazy. I mean, go completely crazy and berserk and beat them. And I can remember him coming out, breaking cinder blocks on his chest with a sledgehammer, so Ivan Putski is who I really, really remember. And then Wahoo, but Wahoo was a friend of the family, and I saw Wahoo outside of the ring. Like I would get to go to the golf course with my half sister's stepfather, if that makes sense. So I was so young that I didn't understand. I didn't understand that my dad's first wife wasn't my stepmother.
Okay.
I would go to their house and spend weekends with my sisters, and she treated me like, so until I got old enough to figure out how it worked, nobody ever told me any different that wasn't my stepmom. Well, her husband would take me to the golf course with him, and his foursome was himself, Lee Trevino, Charlie Pride, and Wahoo McDaniel.
Holy cow! What a foursome!
Well, yeah, but I didn't know who Lee Trevino and Charlie Pride were, but I darn sure knew who Wahoo was.
I mean, just the mix. That's quite the mix to begin with. Just Charlie Pride.
Got to kiss an angel good morning.
I saw Charlie Pride sing in Branson, Missouri, towards later on in his career. So it's interesting to think about him on the golf course with Lee Trevino, a golf legend in and of his own right, and Wahoo. What do you have? I mean, if you don't mind me asking on Wahoo, being that young and just seeing it, what's your early memories of Wahoo McDaniel?
Just if we saw him get hurt on when I'd watch it with my sisters, if he got hurt on television, we'd all be upset.
I don't guess there's been a lower time in my career when I was sitting on TV in that wheelchair, and they came on the TV and threw $10 worth of silver dollars in my face and told me to have a happy trip home.
So that leads in with Wahoo. I mean, you're seeing it on television. You've also seen this guy outside of, the wrestling or what's on television. How much do you remember at that age, even that young age, of him keeping what we call kayfabe?
I just knew he was. I mean, I was always nervous around him. I was very small when I was around him. Mm-hmm. So I remember him being larger than life to me, though. I will tell you that if you ever go to like NWA Legends or whatever they're calling it now with Team or the Gathering, or go to a convention where Karen McDaniel, his wife, is there and she has pictures on her table, she'll have a picture normally of Lee Trevino, Charlie Pride, and Wahoo. And I told her one time, I said, I know who took that picture, because it would have been the unfamous person in that foursome, because he was a nightclub owner and that's how he knew them all.
That's
became friends with them.
incredible. That's so. Do you know who won out of that foursome? If
I have
they
no
ever
clue. No clue.
I didn't know if Wahoo.
I would
went
have
total
to guess it
fatal
would have
four-way.
been. It would have had to have been Lee Trevino, I'm sure.
Wahoo
Not
puts
a doubt in my
Trevino.
mind. I don't know how good Wahoo and Charlie Pratt were, but in the 1970s, Lee Trevino was the man. I think he's winning
Yeah.
U.S. Opens, and
You never know. I mean, Wahoo could have threatened them, or they were just as scared of him. So you never know what could have happened out there. But it goes to the follow-up question I was going to ask you, which is every single wrestling fan, usually at some point in their life, when they are usually younger, they've got their guy or their moment is probably a better way of putting it, when it became real to them, or they felt like, man, this is real.
It's still real to me.
What was it that made you really believe in pro wrestling and made you just buy into it?
well, as a small child at that first stint, I believed everything I saw. But then I got away from pro wrestling when Saturday Night Live came on, because I've always liked comedy. And I found Saturday Night Live and I started watching it. And even now, looking back on it, it was years later that I actually got some of the references. I mean, even as a small child, listening to Richard Pryor, listening to Red Fox.
Oh, this is a big one. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
What are you doing in my dressing room?
Right now, I'm having a heart attack.
My parents had albums. As I got older, I knew the jokes. I'd repeated them 1,000 times, not even understanding everything that I said. And then you'd have that epiphany that I get the joke now. I'm old enough to get the joke. But I watched Saturday Night Live. And then in 1982, I came home from work one night and my brother was watching wrestling. I decided I'd give my brother a hard time about it. My mom told me to leave him alone.
Leave him alone.
But it was it was August 14th, 1982. Saturday night. And on the 15th at Reunion Arena, they were going to have world class called a Star Wars card. And the main event was Kerry Von Erich versus Ric Flair, 2 out of 3 falls. And my brother, I see Ric Flair, he's got on a fur coat. The premise of this night, the reason he's on is he's going to have a training match. And he drew Brian Adias, which was the Von Erich's family friend, Kerry's friend with high school with. Then Kerry drew Kevin. Now, I couldn't have told you Von Erich from Von Erich. The only one I'd ever heard of was Fritz. I mean, I'm out of the loop in 82. So Flair's talking, saying, because Kerry would hold his hands up. I mean, Kevin would hold his hands up, Kerry drop kick his hands. And I'd say, and Flair would say, get on the mic. And he was at ringside. I think he had 2 women with him. And he was like, that's not how you do it, Von Erich. Bust him in the mouth, because that's what it's going to be like when he's in the ring with the Nature Boy. And I mean, he was just so cocky. Like, I mean, immediately he mashed an annoying button with me. Like, I'm teasing my brother, like, you know that stuff's not real, right? And my mom's said, leave him alone. But Flair's getting under my skin. Well, and then as it goes, my brother tells me backstory and, of what's going on and who Brian Adias is. And later in the night, now it's Ric Flair's turn with Brian Adias. And Flair gets in there and he's using, it's a training match, but he's using Brian Adias up, just torturing him. And, and Kerry's madder and madder because they're wanting to come in and, they're really, so I'm getting worked. But I tell my brother, I said, and I know on Sunday I can't get out of the house till my room's clean. So I tell my brother, I said, if you clean my bedroom for me, I'll take you to that tomorrow night. Well, I didn't have any intentions of taking my little brother to wrestling matches, but he did such a good job on my room that my mother said, you're taking him. So we went down to Reunion Arena and we got tickets on the very last row at the very top of the arena. So we barely got tickets at the door. But as the night went on, I mean, I had Harley Race versus King Kong Bundy. I had no idea who these guys were. No, I didn't know who Harley Race was. I had Kabuki and
Kabuki!
As the night goes on, I'm getting more and more into it. And by the time that Kerry and Flair get in the ring, and they use a special referee, and Kerry gets the first fall and gets disqualified the second fall, and he should have got disqualified. I mean, it was just because then the third fall comes out, and then Flair comes out. I mean, Fritz comes out, and Fritz gets into it with the referee, and he hits the referee, whoops the referee. And I yelled so much that night that I was coughing up blood. My throat was bleeding because I yelled my throat out. Then I was hooked. But to tell you, when I honestly bought in and thought it was 100% real was Christmas night of 1982. When Terry Gordy slammed that cage door on Kerry Von Erich's head. I did that. I mean, it looked so real.
I think
so
that's
real.
That's one of the big hallmarks in the what we call the art of professional wrestling, is being able to suspend your disbelief, even if you're a skeptic going in or going, oh, that's all fake and all of that type of stuff. But being able, a good performer, and the greats do it better than anyone else, they can get even a skeptical person to suspend their disbelief and live in the moment of what is going on. And we
were outraged. We were outraged. I mean, that arena was on the verge of a riot. The Dallas Police Department, armed off-duty officers, uniformed, were security.
You don't just jerk it out. That's dangerous. Smoothly and safely.
Getting the Freebirds up that ramp after they slammed that cage door on Kerry's head. I mean, it seemed so real. And I was never one that, even from the get-go with telling my brother, that stuff's not real. I was one of those fans like, all right, that's not real. That's not real. But that was real. And when Terry Gordy was involved, I can't ever remember a time when Terry Gordy was involved that I didn't believe it was 100%. When Kevin Von Erich was in there, Kevin Von Erich looked like he was always throwing live rounds. It always looked like a fight. And David Von Erich's intensity, just delivering an interview.
Ric Flair said my little brother Mike has no wrestling potential. We all know that's bull.
Like, he would tell you what he was going to do, and then he went out and did it. He grabbed Gary Hart around the throat one night and told him, he goes, "You disgust me." I mean, they used to do Saturday Night Wrestling in the Will Rogers Coliseum, which is a rodeo coliseum. For years, that's where the World Championships were held every January. Fort Worth called it the Fat Stock Show. And so he had him, and he came out, and then there was like a backdrop. It was a backdrop is what it was. That they would do their interviews away from the ring on the backdrop, but the crowd could see it. And but it was over by the chutes for the rodeo. And when David Von Erich came out one night, he grabbed Gary Hart and he pushed him all the way up against one of those rodeo chutes and had him by the throat. I mean, you disgust me. And I thought he was going to just completely destroy Gary Hart right there.
I think one of the things that's absolutely necessary, I mean, Gary Hart, that's a name, unfortunately, we don't hear a lot about it for the modern wrestling fan, but it goes back to that classic time of what we call good guys, bad guys, and wrestling lingo talk, heels and face. Face is a good guy, heel's a bad guy. And I think especially as like growing up, even today, everybody has their favorite heels and faces, and who you're rooting against, who you're absolutely cheering for. I know for myself, even growing up, I mean, for me, the ultimate good guy growing up was Hogan. I mean, it's the Hulkamaniacs everywhere. I think everybody has their favorite. For some, maybe Ultimate Warrior. Newer in the 90s, it would have been The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin. Today, who knows? Those lines are so blurred now. But Dave, going back, you talk about the Von Erichs, you're talking about Flair, you're talking about Gordy, the Freebirds. I mean, all of these are legendary names. There's not one person, even Gary Hart, every single person you're naming is a legend. But who are your personal favorite 2 or 3 heels, 2 or 3 faces, good guy, bad guys that you're like, I'll pay my bottom dollar to go and see them win or lose?
David Von Erich. David Von Erich was my favorite of the Von Erichs. Unfortunately, we lost him way too soon. But David was my favorite. I'd say Terry Gordy was my favorite heel. Gino Hernandez was one of my favorite heels.
If you want to see me, Gorgeous Gino, you've got to pay.
At that time, I really liked Chris Adams. I like Chris Adams, liked Iceman Parsons. And I like Kerry and Kevin, don't get me wrong. It's just that David. And then when we got cable, I liked Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. I liked Ted DiBiase. I hate Ted DiBiase with the black glove.
But I think during the time that you're talking to, because you're mentioning the names, it's territory wrestling.
Right. I mean, we're talking 82.
Yeah.
82 through 88 is 89 is my sweet spot. Once we got cable and Tully Blanchard. Oh my God, I hated Tully Blanchard.
I know how to be a champion, and it's my rules. I'm the one that dictates. I'm the man that says it all. And Dusty Rhodes, you go to the bottom of the heap.
But then my favorites, when David died, Magnum TA filled the void for David, because Magnum TA was another one. He was a gritty. He could have been a heel. He did a lot of heel stuff. I mean, he basically was just really cool.
The U.S. heavyweight title held by that man. One part of America's team, the other part with us also, Dusty Rhodes. This is Magnum TA.
You knew he could take care of business. He could handle himself in a fight. So, and that's what I liked about David. David had a heel side, and he really didn't wrestle any different as a face as he did a heel. Magnum TA, to me, was the same way. And he filled the void that David left behind. But in 1984, when Kerry Von Erich won the championship from Ric Flair, a light went on in my head. That as much as I thought that, because every time Ric Flair came to town, I tried to go. So Ric Flair was the draw for me. I mean, it was working. I wanted to see him get beat until I saw him get beat. And then I realized that's not what I wanted to see. The thrill was in the chase for me. Mm-hmm. So that's when I quit hating Ric Flair and started loving Ric Flair. And then I got late in 84, I got my first VCR to tape the Superstation, just to listen to Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair cut promos. Oh! Ric Flair and then later the Horsemen. And from then on, I probably was a bigger fan of the heels than I was the faces.
So you're starting, like I said, territory. WCCW is Von Erichs, right? Got that right? WCCW. So you're seeing all the Von Erichs. That's I
got in just in time for the Von Erich Freebird feud.
Okay, so you're seeing all of that. You're growing up in really a golden era of that, but also at the same time, nobody realizing it at that time. You're also seeing kind of the end of that era. I mean, people today look back at those times as something truly special, but they didn't really recognize that was coming to a close because of what Vince McMahon's doing. But before we get there with WWF, at some point you decide, I know this may be skipping ahead quite a ways, but at what time did you ever decide or think to yourself, I actually don't want to be out in the crowd. I actually would like to be in the ring. I want to be involved.
I wanted to be a referee at 18 years old. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be David Manning. Mm-hmm. I liked how David Manning was the different type of referee. He didn't take any crap off of him. He wasn't much bigger than me. I really like David Manning, what he brought to it. I went down to Doug's Gym in downtown Dallas. That's where I'd heard the wrestlers worked out. And I was going to go down there. I'm going to try to, what do I need to do to become a referee? Anyway, I got ran out of there.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here.
And unfortunately, I didn't have it in me at the time to be persistent. And, I just, I didn't think that was at 18 years old, it wasn't going to be what I thought I could do. And if I have any regrets, maybe I should have been more persistent.
One word: persistence.
I hear how Bruce did it. I hear how Bruce Pritchard got in with, just maybe I should have started hanging out and trying to get to do stuff. I just didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And also at 18 years old, I was working full time too. I was trying to go to school, work. Got married at 19. So life went on.
Yeah. Life's moving along at that point too.
But let's fast forward to around 2005. My little brother is working as a personal trainer, and one of the other personal trainers is wrestling in Arlington, Texas at PCW. And he said, "Hey Dave, they got a show out there on Friday and Saturday nights. Let's go out there and watch my friend Chad wrestle." Okay, we do it. Well, I'm sitting there and I'm watching, and wrestlers has changed. Independent wrestling has changed. I mean, I'm still watching on television. I was there for from Nitro, the Monday Night Wars, the Attitude Era, Rock and Hogan.
We in the WWF think that you, the audience, are quite frankly tired of having your intelligence insulted.
WrestleMania 17 we went to. I was a fan of all that still. Just that, but when we went and I saw guys my size and smaller wrestling, a little, I'm thinking, And I find out they have a school. My good friend Mike Page and Joey Corman one night had dinner with them. I sold Mike a wrestling belt, and they told me stories of traveling as tag team. They'd work Wildside in Georgia. They'd go up to Illinois and, spending all weekend in the car working shows and telling me how horrible the life of a professional wrestler is on the road.
I couldn't think of a more horrible job if I wanted to. And you have to do it. You have to.
And by 3 hours later, I couldn't wait to go to wrestling school. And Paige told me, you go to that school at the PCW because they'll teach you right. They won't hurt you, and that'll be so now wanting to be a referee at 18, because I knew I was too small to be a wrestler. Fast forward now, I'm going to wrestling school because at 39 years old, I've decided I'm going to be a wrestler. Well, after a few months of it, I could have done it. But if you go to, especially back then in the early 2000s, if you go to an indie show, there'd be somebody on the show like they don't have any business being on there. And I never wanted to be that guy. And they were going to do an angle. They were going to do an angle where another promotion, SPW, my friend Mike Page's promotion, was going to invade PCW's Uncut show. And Friday night was Uncut. Saturday night was Full Throttle. And Saturday night was Friday night show was mostly the students. And they'd mix maybe a couple of the guys from the main show. They actually had television in the early 2000s.
It's a new plasma TV and a new Xbox system.
So Full Throttle was what everybody wanted to get on Saturday night. So they were invading the Friday night show, and they needed a heel referee. We needed an SPW referee. And my trainer was Lance Hoyt.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he didn't have any idea how old I was at first because I had dyed my hair.
Man, but the babes are back.
So I didn't look like those kids' daddy. Well, I took a few weeks off because I had some personal problems at the house. And I went and got my hair cut. And I just had my head shaved, much like I do now. So all that hair dye was gone. There was some gray showing. And he asked me, he said, "Dave, how old are you?" And I told him I was 40 years old. And he's like, I'm not telling you that you can't wrestle. He said, but my job is to try to lead you in a direction that you can make money in this business. And I guess in that point, being a hobby wrestler is what I would call them now. It's somebody's happy to work locally on the weekends, because I didn't have any, I knew that the right person can be seen. Anybody can be seen by the right person and put in. I mean, look at the run that James Ellsworth had.
Right.
Yeah. Not disparaging. I'm not saying that James Ellsworth isn't talented. I'm saying that you look at his look. How many times he beat AJ Styles? So, I mean, you can get hot. The same thing with Matt Striker, who has the look and everything, but right place. He called in sick to go one night and ended up getting a job out of it.
Because I am Matt Striker, and I used to work as a professional teacher.
But I was approaching it as that I could go out there on Friday night and have a match, living a dream, not trying to give up my day job to go on the road. I don't think it would have ever, and then I didn't think it would. And now I don't have any, I don't feel any regrets that I didn't stay with that, because I don't feel like it would have ever led to, I wasn't going to be on AEW at 50 in my mid 50s. I would never go make it WWE, not as a wrestler.
Do you think with somebody like a Lance Archer, we hear stories back in the old days of the goal, if you went to wrestling school, you said, hey, I want to be in wrestling. The goal by a lot of the trainers was, we're going to beat you up and do everything we can to push you out. Somebody like Lance comes in, and I'm not trying to build that up. Certainly if this isn't a right take, you can correct me, but somebody that takes an approach of a Lance that looks and says, you know what, my goal is to now look at what is going to help you be the most successful instead of pushing you out of the business. Do you think training has changed in that sense to where it's no longer let's drive them out, but let's still be honest and move people towards what they can excel
Oh
at?
yeah. Well, also I think that as long as you're paying your tuition, they're going to keep trying to teach
That's
you.
the truth. You pay money, we'll tell you whatever.
But I don't think it's a work that way.
Right.
I think that I think a lot of there's lots of quality training now. There used to be a lot of non-quality training. There's lots of quality training. There's places that aren't going to help you, but there's so many good options. You got Dr. Tom and Kane, the Jacobs Pritchard Academy. You got Booker T school. You got Dustin Rhodes has a school. You got QT Marshall's deal with the Nightmare
you've got
Factory.
a whole new crop of people. I know back in the day when I was here in Florida, if you wanted to go to a reputable school to learn reffing or wrestling, you went up to Bang up in the Ocala area, which was Dory Funk's. To do that back in the day. And today, I think there's more options than ever before.
Oh yeah. I mean, Seth Rollins has a school.
I think it's Iowa, right?
In Iowa. So, I mean, there are very legitimate options that you can get in. And I mean, even if you want to be a referee, you can get on with it, just show up at a show and you might be ring crew for a while and they'll work with you and teach you, because there is a shortage. There's a shortage of good referees on the indies.
So what's that process like? I mean, when you decide I'm going to go in and you make the switch from advice to say, hey, why don't you look at being a referee? First off, that's a pretty big transition in mindset to go from hobby wrestler or I want to do this to being a referee. What is the difference?
Well, for me, it was great because I like being in the ring. I already knew that the wrestling wasn't going like I can do it. Mm-hmm. I could do it. It was just not well. And I wanted to be a referee initially. Oh man, I can't be a wrestler. All right, I'll be. It wasn't a consolation prize, but it was sold to me that I was going to be a heel ref. Then I went out and they worked with me. In training, I'd referee the training matches, and then I had my debut with Michael Faith versus Ryan Davison. Ryan Davison is still tearing it up, by the way. Reality of wrestling, he's all over the place. Unfortunately, Michael Faith, we lost him a couple years ago. But they were my first match, and I loved it. I loved the adrenaline that was flowing before I went to the curtain to go to the ring. So scared to get in the way and mess something up. But I started refereeing, and then they decided, we're not going to make you a heel ref because they thought I was doing a really good job as a referee, and we need referees. So then I started going around like there was a flea market show. I just go to the flea market show just to get ring time. It's not, I mean, even the promoter would, and even the talent on it would probably admit to the day that I hate to use the term shit show, but it was a shit show. And, you know, the good part is that we were going to get elote and Coca-Cola in a glass bottle because it was at the Mexican flea market. But it was ring time. And that promoter actually let me try ring announcing, which I found out very quickly I wasn't any good at.
White trash and rednecks! The following contest is a non-titles knockout handicap match. Introducing first.
What do you think about that?
Sean Jones, Bolt, Rush, Average Step Randy. How am I supposed to know what their names are?
And I tried to be really cool because the iPhone had just come out in 2010, 2009, 8. Whenever I tried it, I just got an iPhone. So I put the format on my iPhone, and I was going to, instead of having a card in the ring, I was reading the screen. Well, Mike Page was there, my good friend, old buddy, old pal, and he decided to rib me. And he would call me every time I'd start to announce. So my phone would, and then I didn't know how to turn off getting the calls. So that's my memory of ring announcing. And I did it I did it 3 or 4 weeks, and I had a good time, but I rapidly realized that ring announcing wasn't for me, but I wanted to try it. But getting in, just being able to get in the ring is a privilege. To this day, sometimes I get mad I say mad. I don't know if mad's the right word. Maybe it's just jealous that when a promoter at the end of the night will let the kids get in the ring, because I was almost 40 before I got to get in the ring.
Right.
Heck, my grandson got to get in the ring a few weeks ago, and I didn't realize it was his first time. And I got in there and showed him a few things. And after the show, he helped break the ring down. 10 years old. I'll always tell you that every chance I get to get in the ring is a privilege.
Yeah.
And so I refereed, tried ring announcing. And then also Mike Page and Joey Corman decided they wanted to be a tag team called the Medics, where they would wear scrubs and masks, and they needed a manager. And that's when Dr. Phil D. Payne was born. And I told him, I said, I could be the chief of staff. I'll be Dr. Philip D. Payne, Phil D. Payne.
I think one of the biggest things too is constantly learning and being willing to go out and try new things. And, you know, all the time, especially in the world of professional wrestling. You have maintained and continually had kind of a consistent mainstay on the independent scene. And you mentioned, like, obviously during the Attitude Era and things like that, there was a time where the indie scene was really difficult. I mean, depending on where you lived, it could almost be non-existent. And I remember going to independent shows and there'd be a dozen people there. I mean, it was that bad. Today, modern independent scene wrestling has made a resurgence. Like, it is coming back in most areas where you can go and find and see really great independent wrestling. But you have primarily been on the independent scene doing that. But one of the biggest things, and I think what most people will know you from and know you, I don't know, I hate to see it's like the peak of things, but you'd probably agree at this point, it is one of the most important moments of your career, which is transitioning to a main event 1, 2, 3 of the legend Ric Flair, which I know a lot of people that are listening right now want to hear about that and talk about Flair's last match.
It's Super Dave!
All right, Dave, come on.
Dave Miller! 1, 2, 3!
Flair, which I know a lot of people that are listening right now want to hear about that and talk about Flair's last match. But before we get to Flair's last match, because you are the guy that ultimately drops the 1, 2, 3, going from 18 years old, I want to be a referee, to jumping into the ring and saying, yeah, I'm almost 40, and guy like Lance Archer talking to you and doing ring announcing and managing and all that, to then about a year ago going, all right, whoa, I'm doing this, and it is a major level thing. That's incredible.
You could have told 16-year-old me watching Ric Flair for the very first time that in 2022 I was gonna be in the ring with Ric Flair in any capacity.
It's unbelievable.
Let alone be the answer to a trivia question.
It's unbelievable. And obviously, you're the guy that drops the 1, 2, 3 on Flair's last match. But before we go into that, just a little bit of backstory for those that may not be familiar. You can still order that and see it online. I think Fight TV's got it, and just for the history of it, it's worth taking a look at. But there's so much more on that card than just Ric Flair's last match. And believe you me, I watched it live.
If that main event wouldn't have been on that show would have been good enough without it.
Exactly. It was an incredible show, top to bottom. It was held in, and just kind of walking through it. I mean, obviously with his last match, it's held on July 31st in last year, 2022, which is a little over a year from the time that we're recording today. And originally it was going to be at the Nashville Fairgrounds, and it holds roughly about 1,700, 2,000 people, depending on what kind of an event is there. I think if you really
we could have got 3,500 is what the seating was going to be on it.
There you go. So you go from, it's going to be there at the Nashville Fairgrounds. And so tickets go on sale for this event. And all of a sudden it's obvious, man, on day one, when tickets go on sale and it's Ric Flair's last match, we need a bigger building. So before tickets ever go on sale, before it's ever announced, in April 2022, footage of Ric Flair training gets out. May 2022, Ric Flair announces he's going to wrestle one more match. June 2022, they have a press conference, and Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett attack Flair following the press conference.
Come on! Yeah!
That sets the storyline up that Jay Lethal's insulted. He asked Flair for a spot on the card. Flair says no. Jeff Jarrett's angry and says, you disrespected my dad, who was a legendary promoter, Jerry Jarrett, who we lost not too long ago, unfortunately. Sets up all that. July 2022, a 3-part documentary airs to help do the build up and leads to July 31st.
Well done documentary. Well done
awesome.
Documentary. As good as anything you'll see on any wrestling promotion. I mean, I thought it was WWE level.
Yeah, and
quality.
Darius Rucker is the one who does the narration on that,
Yes.
by the way. Hootie and the Blowfish, Wagon Wheel country music fame does it. It's perfectly done.
Well, he's like me. He loves Ric Flair.
Mm-hmm.
He loves Ric Flair. I mean, he owns a Ric Flair robe. You can't buy it from him. He's not going to sell it.
I mean, the entire buildup, that whole timeline happens. But it's obvious before April and that footage ever leaks. When was the first time that you heard, hey, I think this match is happening?
We knew it was going to have a match. We did not, I'm privy to a lot of stuff. I'm privy to a lot of the stuff. Mm-hmm. I knew there was going to be a spot on the card for me. I knew I'd get to referee a match on the card. From Conrad would bounce stuff off of him. We pitched stuff to him. We could, hey, what hadn't been done that we could do, and we'd all just throw out ideas. And so that's what over the years we've been privy to. We know this is going to happen. Here's some ideas. The card was tight-lipped. Conrad our group chat wasn't getting any information on all this. As a matter of fact, at one point, Conrad left our group for about a month and a half because it became a high-pressure situation trying to get all that together. I mean, we knew Rick was going to have a match, but we didn't know who Rick was going to have a match against.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, there were all kinds of rumors floating around. I mean, at one point it was Ric Flair and FTR. They would be wrestling with Ricky Steamboat, and even Steamboat said he was approached about it, and Rock and Roll Express. And so there's rumors galore going around.
Steamboat says that he had when he didn't want any part of it once he found out Rick was wrestling with Pacemaker.
Yeah.
That's
and that's out
side.
there. Yeah. I mean, that's out there. And, obviously I don't want to get into that, but
I don't know.
It's public and who knows the full reality, but it changes a lot. Even at one point, Matt Cardona was talking about it, doing the NWA championship and doing something there. Of course, he got hurt. He gets removed from it or removed as a possibility. Not that, again, don't misunderstand. None of these things were like set in stone, but ideas being thrown around. But when you whenever it was, you don't have to share when it was you first heard about it. But when you first hear the guy that you went to go see as a young kid wrestle with your brother is coming back for one more match, and it's a reality, not a rumor. What'd you feel in that moment?
I was worried about him. I was 100% worried about him. Mm-hmm. There was nothing in my mind that thought that this was a good idea. Mm-hmm. I saw the match. I saw the training that he had with Lethal. But I'd also seen how bad of health he had gotten into. And I know he got in good shape, but he still had a pacemaker. So I was genuinely concerned for Rick. And Conrad told us that he's been doing this every day. He's in the best shape of his life, probably right now. I mean, he's not going to be what he was 30 years ago, but no. So when I first heard it, it was concern, and then I got to see the documentary probably a week before it dropped, the first chapter of it, and I was hooked.
I think most people, when they first heard it, obviously there was concern. I think that does not have to do, in my opinion, that doesn't have to do because it's Ric Flair. I think that same concern would be anybody. Replace Ric Flair with any name that's in a similar situation. If you have a heart, if you love somebody, you're going to have concern. So that's not a slide. It's not anything like that. But I know that was my initial feeling. And then the card starts coming together. And the first thing going back to, I mean, the response for this thing goes from, all right, we're going to have it at the fairgrounds. And then like I said, I mean, that first day, it became noticeable right then and there. We need a bigger building.
Well, Conrad even shared with, I had him on my show for the anniversary of it, and we talked about it. And he said that WWE
they had a hold. I think they had a hold.
They had a hold. I think AEW and WWE had hold on buildings that he had to get those cleared and getting that cleared immediately. That took some time. I don't know that they were ever looking to move it to the Bridgestone Arena, but I think that if they would have done Bridgestone Arena to start out with, knowing in hindsight, I don't know if they could have sold out the Bridgestone Arena, but they probably could have put 14,000 in there.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, one of the things that comes back, and this is a question that I did thinking about this whole Ric Flair's last match, and you directly, first off, it ends up being moved over to the Nashville Municipal Auditorium,
which is to me probably the perfect venue for this to have happened in.
Yeah, it's a legendary building. So, first, no holds barred. The match and the movie, or the movie and the match. The match is out of there.
Gentlemen, it's time.
No holds barred.
For the 80s Hogan fans and Zeus. But going back, I just looked up, Michael P.S. Hayes wins the NWA US heavyweight belt from Luger at Wrestle War 89. You move forward. You've got the main event at that, though, that overshadows it. which is Flair defeating Steamboat later for NWA, happens at that same arena. Vader in 94 wins the U.S. title from Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Flair wins the WCW championship from Savage. Piper defeats Hogan via sleeper hold. In Your House 2 is there. And that's the real big key
Hulk Hogan
moment.
pile drive. Hulk Hogan pile drives Harley Race on the table.
On the table. But the biggest single event that ever happened there, even though Flair, had 2 big events there and the third with the last, the single biggest event that ever happened there is In Your House 2, 1995, where Jeff Jarrett made his live singing debut of With My Baby Tonight.
Oh, yeah. Tonight is the night. It's what everybody's been waiting on.
And it happens there. Of course, we know it's not really
where they walked out. Where they walked out. We were joking that Jarrett and Road Dogg should have done an autograph signing at the back door where they left. That would have been a great photo op.
And one of the reasons I bring
you could have held the door open for them.
one of the reasons I bring up the Jarrett thing is because that comes around with Flair, because that same night at In Your House, HBK beats Jeff Jarrett for the IC belt. Another one, this is throw out to Conrad Thompson, but also Tanaka wins the ECW heavyweight championship for Mike Awesome.
Tanaka fighting for his life. Oh my God!
In that same building. That was in 1999. And so, but the cool part is I bring up the Jeff Jarrett thing because circling fully around, who is Flair standing across the ring from? On this night, it's Jeff Jarrett. Before we get into that, though, Dave walks into the building knowing the history. Did you have any feelings about walking in there knowing?
I thought it was a cool building. Getting to work in any historic venue is cool. When I walked in, looking at the musical acts on the wall that had been there, the history that had gone on in that building, I walked out because you come in the back door, the backstage door, just a backstage door in Nashville, Tennessee got all over me for some reason. I walked in and I went to and looked at the arena and I saw the setup and I was just kind of taking it all in. And before I had a chance to let it get in my head, because I've never performed in front of that many people before. And I wasn't nervous about it.
Nervous?
Yes.
First time?
No, I've been nervous lots of times.
I'm not nervous. I've never been nervous about being in front of large crowds, but I've never been in front of one like that. I walked closer to the ring and I looked at the ramp, and Jeff Jarrett comes walking down the ramp, and he tells me, "Hey, Dave, tonight before you slide in, I need you to run down, touch the ring, run back up and touch the backdrop, run back down, touch the ring again. I want you to do that about 3 or 4 times because I need you to be blown up before you get in the ring." Because I had asked Jeff Jarrett one time when I met him for the first time, as a matter of fact, "Hey, when you wrestled Tully Blanchard back in 2005, what did he do different that blew you up?"
How dare you?
I had a question about the style of wrestling because he wasn't used to wrestling Tully Blanchard's style, because Tully Blanchard's style wasn't what was going on in TNA. It was a different question about wrestling styles that came out very insulting.
Right.
But now it's our joke. Luckily, he didn't kick my tail about it. But I mean, it was awkward when I asked it. So anyway, that playfulness right out of the gate, really, I didn't have a chance to get nerves. And then Rick comes around.
You can just tell.
Yeah, styling and profiling.
And Conrad's there, and we sit down. Rick messed with me a little bit and said, "Who the F is this?"
Who do you think you are, pal?
And Conrad said, "It's the second referee." He goes, "Well, we need a second referee for?" Because we're bumping Kyoto. Why are we bumping Kyoto? You guys got to tell me this stuff. Come on, let's go to my dressing room. And we all went down to go to his dressing room. But he's just screwing with me because he already knew they'd already been practicing this match for a week. So,
yeah.
But I mean, just the fact that Jeff screwed with me getting there, Rick started screwing with me.
Screw you guys. I'm going home.
It was, I think it relaxed me because I've met Rick several times, but I'm not saying that me and Rick aren't friends. I doubt very seriously he knows what my name is. If you ask him, hey, you know that referee's name that counted your 3 count? I guarantee you he does not know my name.
What? What is your name?
And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't hang out with Rick. I don't socialize with Rick. I've been around him a few times. Normally,
if you hung out with Rick, I don't know if you hung out with Rick all the time, I don't know if you'd be here doing this interview right now. So you're still above ground, Dave. So that's something.
Normally when I'm around him, it's mouth closed, ears open.
It's like Rick said, even in the build up to that, Jay Lethal, he said, I've already died once and I'm not afraid. And I think if you hang around Rick, you're probably dancing with death too, trying to live that lifestyle of the Nature Boy.
When I tell you the actual running down and making the 3 count is not the best part of that day, it's not. I mean, the time I spent in that dressing room, and Jeff Jarrett comes out elevated, in my personal opinion, of, like, if you ask me my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, Jeff Jarrett is on there now. And it's not so much for what he does in ring. It has a lot to do with what he can do in ring, but it's what he does behind the scenes. Because in that room was Ric Flair, Mike Chioda, Conrad, his wife, Megan, Jeff Jarrett, Karen Jarrett, Andrade, and Charlotte Flair. Andrade's English isn't real good. He can speak some English, but it's not real great. So she was pretty much representing her husband. And she had concerns about the match with her father. There's a way that she wanted her father to handle this match that he was against.
That me, the World Heavyweight Champion, will not be put in a situation that he doesn't want to be put in.
Everybody thinks, I mean, Rick legitimately dehydrated during this match. That's a fact. Rick did not drink. He was not drunk when he came out for the match. Rick didn't drink all day. I don't have any reason to lie about it. I saw him drink Diet Coke. He had an elliptical in his locker room, in his personal room. He had an elliptical that he was riding. He just didn't hydrate. But the laying on the apron like he was dying, that was by plan. He's 73 years old. He wanted to be perceived as 73 years old. He appreciated what Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal were both doing for him. And he was not going to try to go out there and look like a 73-year-old Superman against Lethal and Jarrett, because he truly appreciates them. So they were trying to put it all together. And one of my favorite things is that when Ashley got there, Charlotte, he goes, okay, the men need to talk now, baby. Will you step out in the hall? And she started to turn, and then she shot her head around and looked at him, and he started laughing.
That doesn't fly with the chicks these days.
Anyway, there was lots of discussion. She was arguing with her dad a little bit, and Jeff Jarrett shut it down. Got his notepad, and he started laying it out. Like, here's the ring, here's the cameras. I mean, and then he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And he's taken the room over, and he's taken every ego in that room and put it in the palm of his hand. And now we're getting there. And everything, that all the concerns and all the things, watching Jeff Jarrett do that is what elevated Jeff Jarrett. I mean, to me, man, I'd have bought a ticket to see that. Yeah. I am such a fan of Jeff Jarrett and his mind for wrestling. And what I got to see, well, you'll hear the haters and the trolls bash, why is Jeff Jarrett on my television in 2023? This is why. Because what you see that he does on TV is nothing compared to what he does behind the scenes.
I mean, talking about that with that night, even prior, there's one match specifically outside of the Ric Flair match that you were called on to ref, that I think, looking back now, has become an extremely important match in pro wrestling history. And you had the opportunity to call the Von Erichs and the Briscoes. And if you're a wrestling fan, then you know what that means. If you're listening, you're not a wrestling fan, the Briscoes, we're not talking about Jack and Jerry Briscoe here. We're talking about the new era of the Briscoes. And you got Mark and Jay. And part of that with Jay Briscoe, none of us knew that we were watching what would become, in my opinion, and I think it is. I mean, I could be wrong on this, but I think this is the last major platform match of the Briscoes on a major platform. And one of the reasons I say that, before I have the haters, before you want to send in and be hateful, you got to remember this was the second highest grossing independent pay-per-view of professional wrestling. So before you say may have wrestled something else, I understand he wrestled GCW, but this is the single biggest match that the Briscoes wrestle together before we end up losing Jay tragically in a car accident. The man that's in the ring calling it is you, Dave. And tell me, what was that process like? How do you get that the decision? How are you the man in the ring for that?
Now, I knew that I was going to be part of the Bunkhouse Battle Royal, and I knew that I was going to present Mance the boot and the belt buckle because Mark is my friend. Yeah, that was all for Mark Nelson. So I knew I was going to get to do that, and then I knew I was going to get a match. And about 2 weeks before the event, Conrad calls me. I'm working. I'll never forget it. I was in Dollar General. I was in a Dollar General, and I took the phone call, and he said, "Hey, Dave, we're putting the final touches together on the card, and I got a question for you. I need to know, would you like to referee the Von Erichs and the Briscoes, or would you like to referee the Horsemen and the Rock and Roll?" And I laughed, and I said, "Well, there's a Sophie's choice." And Conrad laughed, and I said, "Give me the Briscoes." And that's how I told him. I didn't say, "Give me the Von Erichs. Give me the Briscoes."
Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name's Jay Briscoe, ROH World Heavyweight Champion. If you got a problem with that, do something about it. You see, boys and girls, it's not a playground out there, it's a battlefield.
The Briscoes, in my opinion, were one of the top 3 tag teams in the world. Top 3. Now, you can debate who's 1, 2, and 3, but they're there.
Yeah.
If you wanted to put anybody else above them, I'd like to know who it was going to be. Because I knew that the Briscoes were stars, and I wanted to work with the Briscoes. Working with the Von Erich boys is neat because I was a huge fan of their daddies, or their daddy and their uncles. But the Briscoes are why I made the decision that I made. And I didn't know what to expect from them when I met them.
I mean, looking at them, you made
Yeah.
the right decision. I went back and watched that match prior to us taping today, and I love the Von Erichs. Amazing, had the opportunity to meet them, great young man. But if you watch that match, it's obvious as you watch it that the Briscoes are on a different level, and that's not sliding the Von Erichs, but by
No.
that time, you're
Well,
looking at 2 very seasoned people at the top of their game with the Briscoes.
I'll pull the curtain back on that match too. The Von Erichs had travel difficulties that weekend.
That our speedometer's melted, and as a result, it's very hard to say with any degree of accuracy exactly how fast we were going.
78 miles an hour. Now, you got no outside mirror.
No, we lost that.
You have no functioning gauges.
No, not a one. However, the radio still works. Funny as that may seem, with all this mess, that the radio is the only thing that's really working good, and it's as clear as a bell. Don't ask me how.
I mean, they got there 45 minutes after the show started. We were supposed to be third, and they had to move the match back. And I was panicked. I was panicked that that match was going to get canceled because we already lost Hammerstone. Hammerstone wasn't going to make it for the same. So when Conrad called me to the side that morning, I'll tell you in a minute. I thought when Conrad called me to the side that I was being told that my match wasn't going to happen. So I didn't know I was getting the good news. I thought I was getting the axe. That's what I expected when he said, "I need to talk to you for a minute." Because I knew the Von Erichs were having a hard time getting there. But when they got there, one of them was jet lagged and the other one had food poisoning. And you would think that being late, okay, we need to get together what we're going to do. The Briscoes, first and foremost, were concerned about the Von Erichs as people. You know, hey guys, and then when they were trying to put everything together, it was like I said, the Von Erichs had a few things they wanted to do, but but just the human aspect that I don't see in all my years. You think on that level, you wouldn't see it, and I saw it, and I'll never forget before I went through the curtain to go to the ring, the Briscoes wanted to have a prayer with the Von Erichs, and they all huddled up and had a prayer. And I don't know. Like I said, I didn't know what to expect from the Briscoes. In my opinion of them, I guess you would call it my first impression.
Do you think you didn't know what to expect based on their public persona?
Right.
Versus, just like, look, because I mean, if you haven't had a chance, again,
they look pretty
go
wild.
out and watch them. They look wild and they act wild when they take the ring. And it's something to behold.
Reach for the sky, boy.
It holds up to this
day. They're a textbook
day.
example why you don't judge a book by looking at the cover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I didn't know what to expect from them. Plus the level that they are in the world. Mm-hmm. The level of performer that they are in the world. They're not full of themselves. They were not full of themselves at all. So, and also I was a country boy in the city for the first time with this production. I'm an independent referee that I have wore an earpiece maybe 3 times prior to this night.
Well, I was going to ask you that. What's the difference between being on the indie and like indie shows, and now all of a sudden you're on a pay-per-view type product, television?
Where the camera
what's
is.
the adjustment?
Wherever the camera, where the hard cam
just
is.
Just trying to work towards
and
that.
Stay working in your part of the ring and not taking your back to the camera and getting out of position. And also you're getting your time cues. And I mean, television wrestling is a much different animal than independent wrestling. If you want to see great wrestling, go to an independent show that's not on television. Go to a house show, a live event for WWE, a live event for AEW that's not being recorded, because then those hard time constraints for television aren't in play. You'll see, like I tell everybody all the time that I went to a house show in Jackson, Mississippi, and Eric Rowan with the red beard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
if I could have had that,
AEW, and
if I could have had that Eric Rowan on television, he'd have been over. The Eric Rowan at a live event is different than what you got on television, and that's that way with a lot of it. With the wrestlers that their popcorn break, or you may fast forward through their match. If you taped it, you wouldn't do that at a live event. You'd really be into what's going on there. It's 2 different animals, is what I'm telling you.
And even before you move beyond that, I mean, on Chris Jericho's podcast, he recently had Trent Beretta on, and Trent talks about when he was getting cut from WWE and he was back out on the indie scene. It was like, almost to him, he took it as a positive because he could wrestle now instead of a 3-minute squash or just 5 minutes. Man, I can go out and actually perform. And that's what I think what you're talking about too, being on the independent scene versus television, for everyone around, just the ability to perform and do what you do has got to be immensely freeing. And I would say in some ways satisfying.
You have to respect that, because those guys get paid a lot of money not to be on television.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you got to respect that it's not all about money with them, because they want to get out there and perform, and they want to be the feature. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to be the feature, and you can't blame. I mean, so while making 6 figures just to show up to TV and hang out in catering might be attractive,
it goes back to the old adage. I mean, if you don't want to be at the top, then why you're in the wrong business. Or if you won't want to continue to work with passion, I don't think it's always at the top. I think you got to be passionate about what you're doing, whether or not you're looking for a main event. That's where I disagree with some people who go, well, you know, if you don't want to be the world champion, then why are you in the business? Well, that is true. And that makes a point, but some people are just really passionate about what they do. And I think following passion means a whole lot, has value. And to me, I don't know a whole lot of people that started in professional wrestling that I've been friends with that said their passion when they started was to sit in catering.
Well, yeah. And then what you said about being world champion, here's my theory about very talented people that don't want to be world world heavyweight champion. How many times do you see a wrestler get the world heavyweight championship and they come out worse for it afterwards? I would argue that Hangman Page was hurt by being the AEW champion. That's not saying anything about his in-ring skill, not saying anything about what he does in the ring. It's, how about Ronnie Garvin? Ronnie Garvin was incredible. And then he was NWA champion, and it damaged him. The booking damaged him.
Yeah, it's the age-old question. Does the man need the title, or does the title need the man? I mean, the biggest one that always throws back out is Jake the Snake Roberts is the classic. Didn't need the title. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And, you know, I think that is something. I think the biggest thing is passion about what you're doing. Dave, before we move on, going back to that Briscoe match, because again, it holds a special place. You know, I was able to see the Briscoes in September. That was the last time I got to see them and talk to them in person. I had the opportunity. They were at a GCW show, and that was up in Chicago, and went over there as a late night show, like midnight, something stupid, ridiculous. And they came out, lit the place up, man, on fire. Met them beforehand, talked. Great guys. And here's what I'll say too, because the elephant in the room, I know with a lot of people, when you bring up the Briscoes that listen, there's a lot of haters out there because of past things. Listen, if all of us are judged by our worst day, then all of us need to go away. We all have our worst day. And so I don't judge people by their worst day. I don't want to be judged by that. And so you got to let that go, and move beyond. I think the world needs a whole lot more grace, a whole lot more optimism. And all I can say,
change.
People change.
People
I'm not
change.
And here's something, Dave, that I'll say. I say this all the time, even when I'm speaking within religious circles. If somebody comes up to you and they see you 10 years from now, or 18 years or 20 years from now, and they come up to you and they go, wow, you haven't changed a bit. Don't take that as a compliment. Okay. That's not a compliment, no matter how much you want it to be. You evolve and grow. And so with the Briscoes, you know, seeing them in September and talking with Jay and being around him, it was clear that these guys, there's more to them. When you're in the ring, how much of that match that you're reffing, because they did get together beforehand, how much of it was called in the ring? Because they didn't have a lot of time overall comparatively to everyone else. Did they call a lot of the match in the ring? How was the dynamic being in there for you?
They did. I mean, I knew what they had planned, and they didn't do everything they had planned. Mm-hmm. Nobody wanted to go over on time. Nobody. So there was plenty of time for the main event that night.
Okay. I was going to say, can you say why?
A really bad problem in wrestling is that somebody will go too long. And if you go too long, a classic example of this was a year ago. I worked a show with Silas Young was on it. He's main event. And everybody went over on their time. And by the time his match got into the ring, the crowd was exhausted. They were dead for it. So the show went way too long because people couldn't go out there and do their 10 to 12 minutes. They go too long. That it's not just that you cut away from his time, and we weren't on television, so he could get his full match in, but nobody wanted to see it at that point. The crowd was dead. They were tired. They'd been there too long. So for Ric Flair's last match, the production meeting before, Road Dogg said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to hit our times. We're going to make sure we have plenty of time for Rick and them at the end of the match. Tonight is about Rick. Come out, entertain crowd, get in, get out. And everybody did that. They got their marching orders. Everybody came together and worked a great show, and there was plenty of time left for Rick. So, and that's unheard of. Nobody wanted to be that guy that took too long.
Yeah. And I know from there. So as the show's moving along, like I said, again, a plug, if you haven't seen it, go back, see the entire show, not just one match. If you're somebody out there judging this by just the Ric Flair match and you say, I'm a hater, I shut that down because you didn't watch the whole rest of the show. There's a lot of great stuff on there. Regardless, go back and see it. I've got it on Fight TV. I don't know where else you can get it, but check it out on Fight, and it's worth the view. Now, moving to the main event. you obviously you're told, and you've shared a little bit about that when Conrad takes you aside. And on a side note, if you want to go deeper and hear Conrad Thompson's side of this, Talking Wrestling with Pondwater Dave, he has an episode on there that from our taping now, just a few weeks ago, with Conrad Thompson. And it's a lot of great information that goes in depth from Conrad's side of things. I highly recommend. It's a great listen. It's one of the few times, side note, Dave, because I've tried to talk to Conrad on this. I've tried to bait Conrad to talk about regret or what he would change, and he's very reluctant to ever talk about those things. You got him to actually talk about some things he would change on this, as far as venue and announcing sold out and dealing with those. So that's worth it. Don't spoil it here. You want to hear more about that and hear Conrad in a different way, go check out that show on all kinds of streaming networks, podcasts, and all that. Shameless plug for Dave. Moving into the final event. Here you are. Mike Chioda. By the way, we're going to put over Mike Chioda here. We can't do this without it.
Guys, right now I'm standing next to senior official of WWE, Mike Chioda, man who has 30 years experience. I mean, you've seen thousands of championship matches.
Chioda is the referee that starts the match. WWE, WWF, incredible person. He has Monday Mailbag on ad-free shows, AFS. Check it out. Awesome. Mike gets the call to referee. At some point along the line, he's told, it's presumption. Hey, you're not going to be the guy who does the final 1, 2, 3. We're going to bring in our good friend Dave to do it. First off, what does that alone, that is, to me as a fan, what Chioda did there is unfathomable in the world that everyth's got to be about you. That's
Mike was so gracious. He was happy for me. It was a job. I mean, and also a lot of referees like to take bumps.
Yeah, ref! Oh, God! Ref, let him fight. Yeah, look out! Oh, my God! What, you idiot? God almighty!
Josh Newell, who promotes BIW, is the main promotion that I work for. I'm booked with him all the way to the end of next year. I ask him, he just knows I'm going to ask before I do. Hey, am I bumping tonight? Josh, when am I going to get to bump, man? You haven't bumped me in a year.
And that's what Chioda does in this match. If you haven't seen it, because if you're here, well, Chioda's the referee. How does Dave get involved? There is a spot in the match where Chioda does take a bump. And for those non-wrestling people that are interested, that normally listen to this, that's where a referee inadvertently takes a hit from another wrestler. It's usually something inadvertent from a storyline. And then the referee he's incapacitated. So he's not able to continue refereeing the match. And that's the introduction where Flair is going for the finish and they need a referee to come down. And that's where you come in. That run that you mentioned previously with Jarrett, run back and forth, be blown up. Dave, I've heard you say it before, but for just one more time, your fear, man, of not mess it up. What was that like? What was your biggest concern?
I didn't want to fall down. I did not want to be Charles, not Titus.
I can't believe what I just saw. Did that really happen?
Oh my God!
Yes. Oh my God! Did that happen?
Yes. I did not want to fall down running down that ramp. I did not. And I wasn't nervous about going out there. I mean, earlier in the night before the Von Erich Briscoe match, I actually went to the ring too soon because they were doing the video package with Jerry Lawler, Jeff Jarrett, and Jerry Jarrett in the locker room. And Jimmy Hart, they were doing that in the locker room. So I was in the arena, in the ring, and it gave me a few minutes just to look around and take it all in, which I wasn't nervous. I really wasn't. I mean, I was in the moment I was glad I did that because there's lots of people that wrestle on the indies that we're never going to know what it feels like to be in front of that many people. And it felt good. Rachel Ellering worked a show with me later at BIW, and we talked, and she said that was the biggest crowd she'd ever been in front of, which surprised me because I thought that she'd performed in front of bigger. And I mean, that'll always mean a lot to her that she got to be a part of that, and she got hurt that night.
Yeah, early on in her match.
But and she finished it though.
Yeah.
But So I tell you that to tell you that going back out in front of the crowd later was not an issue for me. But that was my biggest concern, was not falling down.
Well, you didn't fall down. You did not do a Titus O'Neil. Those on the inside, you know what that means. That didn't happen. You jump in.
Hey, he's lucky he didn't kill himself.
No kidding.
There's a hard piece of metal. There's a hard piece of metal that holds the ring up. He could have, I mean, if he'd just been a couple inches over, I mean, it could have killed him as fast as he was going.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you, walking into gorilla position back there, Scott Armstrong, Dr. Tom Pritchard, the Road Dog, Michael Hayes was back there. I walked back there and the Undertaker's sitting there with his wife. I have to walk up, shake his hands, you know, being polite, the wrestling polite. And I'm not definitely not trying to start a conversation with anybody. They're working.
Right.
But that's intimidating to walk into the gorilla position with, I mean, just the producers were intimidating, but then there's Michael Hayes, which we know how I feel about Michael Hayes.
Well, I tell you what, baby, you just check out what's coming up next, and you'll find out just how bad we are.
My first wrestling merchandise was a Bad Street USA t-shirt. Then Hurricane Helms is back there. And I've been friends with Shane for almost 10 years now. So I'm talking to Shane. I got no qualms about going up and visiting with Shane for a minute. But what was funny is that Scott had us going, all the referees going and talking to the talent about, you know, after the event. And he looks at me and he says, Are you going to go do what I told you? And I said, I will, but I'm fixing to run out because of Kyoto's getting bumped. I'm fixing to run out and take his place. He goes, you keep doing what you're doing.
It is crazy. I mean, when you look at that and you hear the stories about everybody that was back there, I mean, good grief. I mean, and for the finish there, sitting ringside at the finish is Undertaker. You've got Michelle McCool. You've got Mick Foley. You've got Bret Hart. Conrad Thompson's right there. I mean,
Mick Foley, Bubba Ray Dudley, Kid Rock.
It's unbelievable. You know, it's an unbelievable sight, that in and of itself. And
I'll share a picture with you. Is me counting to 3. And over there is Rick's wife, Rick's granddaughter, Conrad, Rick's daughter, Kid Rock. My wife is behind Kid Rock. Go figure. But Bubba Ray's looking. I mean, it's kind of like, I've got an old picture of Muhammad Ali versus Superman that the artist put celebrities in the crowd. And it actually came with a picture of like a legend to tell you who the celebrities were. Like you had Donnie and Marie, Batman and Robin, Johnny Carson, Frank Sinatra, Pele. I mean, there's so many celebrities from the time that this picture was drawn. And when I see that picture, and it's actually my backdrop on my computer, that I'm sitting there and I'm looking at Conrad and Wendy and the Undertaker.
I mean, it's amazing. I think, Dave, I think you'll be talking about this 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 25 years from now. You will never, ever not be talking about this moment because of the significance of that moment. Because not just Flair, but I think as time goes back, also the Briscoes, I think guys that were in the ring that are coming up. I think it's an important moment in independent wrestling. There's just no way around that. Haters, lovers, doesn't matter. It's an important moment in professional wrestling. You were right there in the middle of it. And it's an amazing accomplishment.
Well, Dave Conrad called me off to the side that morning at StarCast. We get there and I told you, I thought I'm getting cut. And he said, hey, look, here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to bump Kyoto and we're going to slide you in as the referee. And I thought in my mind, like, you're bumping Kyoto and I'm going to referee the match. And I was horrified at that point. But then it clicked. Oh, they're going to bump Kyoto. I'm going to run in and make the 3 count. I get to run and slide and make 3 count. And I don't even know what to say at this point because I'm overwhelmed. And it's not because of the position on the card, not because I'm going to get to do. But at that point, I knew my friend was doing something for me. Mm-hmm. And that he had the confidence in me and then I knew the magnitude because Ric Flair's the greatest wrestler of all time. And I'm going to make the 3 count. Okay, that hit. But then I'm emotional because my friend has done this for me. My friend's showing a great deal of confidence in me. I know this wasn't an easy sell. And I mean, this should have been Charles Robinson. This should have been Tommy Young.
Did they talk about Charles Robinson? I know Young may not have been able to do it for
Tommy didn't want
reasons.
to. Tommy didn't feel physically able enough. He
right.
felt like he would overdo what he was going to do.
Mm-hmm. Charles, it was just a matter of being with
Charles
WWE.
wasn't allowed to be there.
Yeah,
WWE wouldn't allow Charles to be there, which is sad. And when I think about that, Vince McMahon deserves every bad thing that's happening to him right now, just for that reason. How you not let Little Nate go to the retirement match and you're in town?
If you look at a lot of it going back too, I mean, WWE, if you were a WWE wrestler at that time, because SummerSlam, by the way, SummerSlam's happening, one of WWE's big pay-per-views. I would argue it's their second biggest pay-per-view behind WrestleMania. You have Royal Rumble, but whatever. And a lot of the talent, they were given the edict. Don't show up. You're not allowed to be there. Don't be seen on camera. So people that were really connected. Now, I mean, if you look behind the scenes, there were people, I believe, like a Rey Mysterio, different ones that were like, you know what?
Yeah, Ray and Dom were there.
I'm not going to ask for permission. I'll ask for forgiveness.
The backstage area was a who's who. It was the craziest backstage area I've ever been in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, but you know, what would you expect from Ric Flair?
Yeah.
But Conrad told me, and he went ahead and went about his business, and I'm overwhelmed. And you know that feeling that you get that if you just say one word, you're going to break down and cry?
Are you crying? What's that? Are you crying? Am I crying? No, I'm not crying. You're crying. It's okay to cry. People cry. It's great, but I'm not crying. I'm not a crier. I don't cry. I work out.
I was that emotional, and my wife saw me and she could tell. It was all over me. She goes, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, and then she's pressing me, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, because I had a couple friends that were fixing to leave. They had to go home, come up to say bye. And I can't talk. I mean, I'm trying not to cry in front of everybody. And I just finally told my wife, "It's not bad. It's not bad. Excuse me." And I went to the restroom. I got in a stall and I lost it. I had to let it go. And I didn't say anything to anybody the rest of the day, except for all I told my brother was, "Hey, tonight after my match, don't turn it off. And don't let mom go to bed. Make her watch the Ric Flair match." That's all I told him. And there was people like Cassio knew, Dawkins knew, anybody in our group chat, all of our circle of friends knew. I'm the only one that didn't know.
You're the last one to find out.
And I found out from Conrad that it was always the plan. Like, this is what we're doing. This is the finish.
Mm-hmm.
Dave's going to do it. We just got to figure out how. But don't nobody tell him, because he taught me a little something or another. I don't want to. But he said I wouldn't be able to sleep. And he's right.
Mm-hmm.
So he told me that morning, but I wouldn't let anybody know. Like, Cassio knew I knew, and I knew that Cassio knew, but I wouldn't acknowledge it, because it's like, if I'm getting tested, if I can keep my mouth shut, I'm keeping my mouth shut. Plus, if I'd have said it to somebody and then before the show, it showed up on the dirt sheets.
Yeah. At that point, you're ruined.
I'm not saying anything to anybody.
Right.
Plus, there was also this much of a chance that it wasn't going to happen. It was
it's like they say in professional wrestling, it doesn't happen until
it was the
happens.
plan. But it was the plan. But I told you that Charlotte wasn't happy with her daddy about it,
mm-hmm.
about how the match was going anyway. So that could have changed. So so all day long, I'm excited to get there. But just the people that I met, the talent that I worked with, the referees that I worked with, I'll assure you that all the referees there, I was least qualified to be put in that position. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the right person being in front of the right person to get the opportunity. Because I'd like to tell you that 18 years of professional wrestling experience is why I got the call to be the guy that counted that 3 count. But it's 100% that Conrad Thompson's one of my very best friends, and he wanted that for me. And the fact that it was always the plan, I mean, I'm eternally grateful. I've had the best year from that exposure, more than I deserve. And it's no jealousy, no jealousy at all. I mean, people are genuinely happy for me. People that I wrestled with in that I wrestled with when I started. People that I worked with in Texas. People that I worked with, wrestlers in Mississippi, said that they watched it and they said, "That's our guy. That's our guy."
Yeah.
You know, so they were happy for me. They were proud for me, and I've gotten to do so much. I refereed in 6 states last year, 4 pay-per-views in 6 different states last year. I had the biggest year I've ever had in wrestling.
Well, I know from my end, Dave, obviously I pastor. That's what I do. 7 days a week. You don't stop ever being a pastor ultimately, but there's a famous scripture in the New Testament. I'll paraphrase it, but it says, study to show yourself approved. And when you're looking at it with what you did, you had put the time in, you studied, and there's another scripture that follows up that says, be instant in season and out of season. And when the call came, you were prepared and ready to do it. Even if you didn't feel so in the moment, you were prepared to do it. And so when Conrad gives you the call, you're able to step up, because I guarantee you, if you weren't prepared to do it, friend or not, he's not going to have you do it. We know Conrad in that way. And so you're prepared to do it. And I'm glad that Conrad gave the opportunity. I'm glad that you went through with it. After looking back, it's a little over a year later from the time that we're recording this. It's been a little over a year since that happened. What does it mean to you today, after a year of reflecting back of that moment, that night? What does it mean to you today?
I'm just grateful, just grateful. I became elevated from it. I got opportunities afterwards because of it. But it's been a year. It's not something I want to be introduced as I've started that. I mean, now it's over. It's time to, it's not, I mean, I've been able to sell some merch because of it. I've had promotions that introduced me as the guy that did it. I don't want that anymore. Let's let it go. I mean, that was, but I'm not downplaying it. It's just, once upon a time I was at a comic book show, and it was a long time ago, when Comic-Con still had comic books, but you also had personal appearances by people that had been on TV. I remember, I'm not going to call him by name. He was a child actor. He was a character on a very popular show in the 70s, and he'd grown up, and that's his thing. And he would go around, and it would be his thing to, hey, you want to trade this for this because I'm so-and-so. And I don't want to be that guy, because eventually everybody's like, yes, we know.
Right. And I totally understand that too. I've been in situations where I've seen people like that, and that leads, the reality is you are extremely active still on the scene. And one of the questions I had that wanted to ask you, even moving beyond and closing out the chapter of Flair, one of the reasons we're talking about it now is because it's a 1-year anniversary of it, but that is not all you're known for. Like I said, between the podcast, you're on ad-free shows, you do a lot of hosting there. If people that sign up for that and become a Top Guy, a lot of times you host Top Guy Tuesdays on there, and just a lot of different things. But if you have a few minutes, man, let's do some rapid fire questions, if that's okay, before we do a wrap up. A couple rapid fire questions, man. Give me your favorite angle of all time, the favorite wrestling angle you've ever seen.
Von Erich Freebird feud.
All right. Favorite wrestlers?
David Von Erich, Ric Flair, Tully Blanchard, Magnum TA.
All right. Now they're coming down to the ring and that music hits. Who is it that you stand up immediately when you hear that music? You got to get out of that seat and start shaking your hips, screaming, clapping your hands.
Ric Flair.
All right. The Woo.
Ric Flair, definitely. Actually, for nowadays it's Charlotte Flair.
All right, gotcha, man.
If you want to go modern, if you want to go what my modern fandom is, there's not a lot that can get a reaction out of me anymore. But Charlotte Flair, like at WrestleMania in New Orleans when she beat Asuka, I literally came out of my chair, lost it, high-fiving people around me. And I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So Charlotte Flair is the modern one that can give me that. That emotion.
Still get you on. So with moving along with that, man, most overrated in your opinion wrestler today and underrated. Who do you think? That's a double-edged sword, ain't it?
Man, I hate to say overrated.
We can keep it positive here, and you just go with the most underrated.
Well, I'll be positive with who they are. But I mean, are they overrated, or are they just they've got the opportunity and they're running with it?
That's the thing. That with professional wrestling, man, everything is subjective.
It's not so much overrated. It's just I get aggravated when you can't suspend my disbelief if you can't work a match in the framework of the rules, then I don't think you're very good.
So basically, you're saying the overrated and underrated are the same thing. It's the AEW referees.
The overrated. The overrated. You're overrated if you can't put together a match in the form of the frame. If you can't do it in the form of, if you can't do the art form and the art, I mean, if you gotta throw the rules out without saying let's say a Texas Tornado match where everybody can do whatever they want to, then that's not unbelievable and you're very entertaining. But if you're over there and the referee's just standing there not doing anything because you got to get your crap in, then I think you're overrated because you either A, you can't, or B, you refuse to do your craft in the framework of the rules.
I think it's awesome, man. I think, like I said, it's I think it's all subjective, and everybody has a different response to that. One of my favorite productions that WWE did when they first launched the WWE Network, you may remember this. It was a show called Table for Four.
Yes.
Love that show. So your Table for Four, although it would have to be 5, this is a twist on the Mount Rushmore question that people ask.
Well,
But instead of the
let me
Mount
tell you
Rushmore,
real quick though,
go ahead.
the underrated is a wrestler out of Texas. He's former NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion. Recently got a shot at Kerry Morton after years of not of being the last. He was the last before Billy Corgan. His name is Barrett Brown, 50 caliber Barrett Brown. He's wrestled for New Japan America. He's been all over the country, and to me, he's on the cusp. He should be on your television every week. He's that good.
There you go. I wouldn't expect anything less than somebody that is the tier right below breaking through to that next level from you, Dave. So everybody usually asks the Mount Rushmore, but instead of just putting a name up, on a mountainside, Table for four people, 4 wrestlers or wrestling personalities, either that are no longer with us or still with us, that you would want to sit down at a table, have an ice cold beverage with, have some steaks with, and share a couple hours. Who's at that table with Dave?
Well, I prepared one based on who's alive, and that would be Michael P.S. Hayes, Jeff Jarrett, David Manning, and Tully Blanchard.
Wow, the David Manning thing surprises me on there. That's unique. Why David Manning?
Well, for one, he's my referee idol.
Mm-hmm.
He booked world class. And he's got stories. He's got.
So you just want to
stories.
pick his brain and just ask questions and just listen.
Yes, he's got story. I mean, he can talk about world class. He can talk about the ins and outs behind the scenes, being a member of the NWA. He used to travel with. He used to travel with Flair. He's got stories. Tully Blanchard, Southwest Championship Wrestling, on to the NWA. Tully Blanchard, a promoter. He was a referee. He was a wrestler. He's a promoter's kid. And he was always very opinionated in the business. A top guy from pretty much the whole time he was at Crockett. Had his run with WWE. And then, turned it into something very positive when he retired.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Jeff Jarrett, from the talent to the promotion to just the mind, and Michael Hayes. Michael Hayes has been involved he started the promoter that I worked for last night. Hayes and Gordy started for him. Gil Culkin, IWF, here in Mississippi. It was a kind of wasn't an outlaw promotion. So, but I mean, they broke off from Watts. Mm-hmm. And when you hear about the time that Hayes said he quit and him and Gordy got in the car and left, that was Culkin.
Wow.
Gil's got a different side of that story. That I'll get from him, that he'll get to tell one of these days on my show. It's got. I keep his book here on my desk because I'm working on it.
Wow.
The Mississippi Wrestling Territory by Gil Culkin. I'm working on that book right now. So, but hearing Michael Hayes talk about world class. I mean, first hearing about him being in, how hated he was in New Orleans when they blinded the Junkyard Dog. And the Superdome.
Yeah, what an angle. If you don't know about that,
you'll never see your kids, dog. You're not going to see you can't see your new baby because we blinded you with the Freebird hair cream. So, but if I could talk to somebody that was dead, I definitely want Dusty Rhodes at that table. I'd want Harley Race at that table. If I could it just popped into my head, but I would like to have a conversation with Vince McMahon.
Vince Sr.
With no cameras or anything, and just maybe getting honest answers. Why did we do this? Why did we do this? Explain this to me. Make me understand, because Vince McMahon is my all-time wrestling nemesis.
Okay. And you're talking about Vince Jr., not Sr.
All right. No, I don't.
Gotcha.
Vince is my wrestling nemesis because I've always blamed him.
God!
For what I loved not being what I loved anymore. Because I loved the WWF prior to, and I watched it the night me and my brother watched when Hulk Hogan beat the Sheik. It was on Madison Square Garden Network. We didn't even know Hogan was going to be on that night. But what I'm saying is the rock and wrestling, I was too old for it. I was more for the real presentation on the NWA. My little brother ate up the rock and wrestling and the cartoons and all that, but he's 8 years younger than me. But all of a sudden, DiBiase wasn't wearing a black glove. He's $1 million man. And IRS wasn't Mike Rotundo. He was the IRS. And, Dusty Rhodes is wearing polka dots. And it was like Terry Taylor, now he's a rooster. And he was what I knew. The sheep herders were now the bushwhackers. Two sides of very different sides of the same coin, because they were vicious and now they're you know what I'm saying? So being able to, I'd love, maybe if I could ever have maybe that conversation with Vince explaining to me his mindset, make me understand what I don't understand would be, but that's just,
I think it's interesting, everybody has a different take on it, based on things. And I know that for myself, my own wrestling fandom, it goes into a million different directions with different eras. I remember meeting Kevin Von Erich for the first time. Unfortunately, he's the one that, unfortunately, that sounds bad. That's not even the right word. Good grief. Fortunately, we still have Kevin with us. Unfortunately, we don't have his brothers. But I remember, meeting him down in Dallas, Texas, and just having, 10, 15 minutes to hear. And that got me thinking, man, I wish I could have this conversation with Kerry Von Erich, because I'd love to just hear when he's in his right frame of mind, no demons active, just to hear his story with everything, having everything going around, because he was the body guy. So I think there's all these incredible conversations that we wish we could have. I think Kerry's
the biggest tragedy of all of them. And I'm going to tell you why. Because Kerry was ashamed of his disability. Mm-hmm. Now I'm sure he's in a great deal of pain. He got caught forging prescriptions. I mean, he was going to the pen. He was losing his family. They'd had enough. But if Kerry Von Erich could have embraced, he could have been an inspiration long before Zach Gallen was inspirational.
Yeah.
Because what Kerry could do with one foot at that
it's
time,
unbelievable.
Because he didn't have the technology that we have now. I mean, you see guys with prosthetics now that are remarkable.
Those types of stories are are amazing that I wish we could have. And it's very interesting. And I'm always interested to hear what people have for themselves. And that goes right into my follow-up question that is on kind of rapid fire, which as a referee, normally I would ask a wrestler, who do you wish you could wrestle? But if there was a match you wish you could referee, past, present, or even one that hasn't happened at all, you define the rules. What would you referee if you could referee anyone?
I wish I could have refereed Steve Anthony and Jushin Thunder Liger for the NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship. It was a few years ago. And Tim Storm when he defeated Jack Stane for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship.
Wow,
The only World Heavyweight Championship I've ever done was Jack Stane defending against Houston Carson. I would have loved to been able. I love Tim Storm. Tim Storm is one of the most quality human beings you will ever meet in your life. He deserves every bit of success that he gets. When Tim became the NWA World Heavyweight Champion,
yeah,
I was so happy for him.
It just seemed very long overdue, by the way. I know that's deep in the weed for the casual listener, but go out of your way and see some of his matches, see some of his promos, the way he carries himself is tremendous.
And I mean, he's just always been. I've refereed his NWA North American matches before. I refereed for Tim when I started. Him and Apocalypse were the dark circle. I saw Tim on SmackDown one time, man. He actually got beat. He actually got beat with his own finisher.
Is that why you have a secret beef with Vince?
No, but now that you've said it, I'll just pile in one more.
Just add it to the list.
Just another layer.
Well, man, yeah,
no,
Dave.
Those are the two that I could have, that I was in the vicinity and probably could have done. Now, whenever Tim Storm comes around, I like to referee his matches. But if James Beard is on the show, James will normally get him. Legendary referee James Beard. Love James Beard. I love it when he's on a show that I'm on because you can only get better by working with better people.
Right.
And I'm always for that. And so I love it when James is around, and him and Tim go so far back and they travel together. So I know James is going to get that assignment every time.
Oh, man. Well, Dave, again, before we wrap up here and heading into the finish line on this, and again, I thank you so much for your time today and just having an extended conversation about your life, your fandom, moving into refereeing. Like I said, you could check out Dave on, Talking Wrestling with Pondwater Dave. I guarantee you it's always entertaining. It's fun. His co-hosts on there are great, and they talk about a lot of different stuff. But with that on there too, Dave, I wanted to ask you, where do you see wrestling going next? Where do you see it going in the future from here? I mean, WWE is doing big business. AEW is doing big business. You've got wrestling, independent wrestling that's growing, but where do you think it's going next from here? And where are you going next?
It's big, and it's going to keep getting bigger and stronger. And but streaming is opening the doors. Streaming is opening the doors for independent wrestling. WWE is continuing to grow. AEW is continuing to grow. It seems like content is what's important, not as much quality as content. Now the premium live events like SummerSlam, we just came off SummerSlam. It's one of the best SummerSlams I've ever seen. I mean, whenever they do their weekly shows. I mean, look at AEW. Look at AEW now with Dynamite, Rampage, and Collision. There's a demand for it. They want this. It's not like the old days when they didn't want this. Think about that. Turner did not want wrestling on there. Nobody ever wanted it. Time Warner bought them and couldn't wait to kill it. And now it's back. And they got 5 hours. Is it 5 hours? 6? Yeah, 5 hours of television.
It's I think it's 5 to 6 hours.
2 hours and an hour.
Yeah.
Not counting when they'd have then they'll do the Clash of Champions or Battle of the Belts.
Battle of the Belts.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So there's an appetite for it. And with all these streaming services, there's going to continue to be. And I'd like to tell you that I'll put a plug in for Premier Streaming Network, where they're putting independent promotions on there. And what we're doing on Talking Wrestling with Pondwater Dave, we're starting to put a focus on independent wrestlers and independent promotions. Like we had Jared Rollins from Tri-State, one of the owners and promoters of Tri-State Wrestling.
Oh,
we
yeah,
had him on.
You just recently had on too. You go back in the archives, and Cabana Dan was on there.
That was this week.
One of the
Cabana
most recent
Man Dan,
episodes. Yeah,
we had
amazing.
Kaya McKenna,
Mhm.
An independent wrestler. This week we're going to have Ray Fury. Coming up, we're going to have the promoters from Rise. Megan, then their backstage reporter Megan Nelson.
Yeah, Megan. I know Megan too. I mean,
But we're going to promote Rise this week. This week we did just a pop-in special that's not even part of my normal. We got on the channel. Steve Starr and Gil Culkin came on, and the Legacy champion Big Swole Justin Cole came on, and we actually broke down every match that was on the card. And we're going to start doing that on any shows that I'm going to be on. I don't know, I mean to say events, but we're going to start promoting independent wrestling that way. And there's always an invitation to an independent wrestler or promoter that if you want to, you want a platform to try to get your product out there, shoot me a message at Ref Super Dave PWD, at PWD Pod on Twitter, Pondwater Dave at yahoo.com. Send me a message.
Yeah,
I'll be glad to come on. I'll be glad to put you on to bring awareness to your programs, because there's so many different promotions on Premier Streaming Network now. So you can get on there and you can watch independent wrestling, and you should support independent wrestling. And I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a second.
Oh, go for it.
That's what I tell everybody about independent wrestling is don't think it's the minor leagues. I'm not going to tell you everything you're going to see on that show is going to be a 5-star match, but what you're seeing, the only difference between an independent wrestler and a WWE superstar or an AEW wrestler or TNA or whatever, the only difference between the guy that you're seeing at your local high school gym is he's the same caliber wrestler that just hasn't had the opportunity yet. But when you support independent wrestling, you build a bond with these wrestlers. And then when you see them on SmackDown or you see them on AEW, there's a certain sense of pride that your guy is on television now. I tell everybody right now that there's a female wrestler named Promise Braxton, and you need to see her on the indies while you can, because right now I'm telling you, it's going to be sooner than later that she's going to be on one of these television shows, and you're not going to see her on your independent promotions.
Yeah,
and that's just an example.
Yeah, I mean, I will definitely double that, and I affirm what Dave is saying, because I remember going down to the local armory and seeing guys like Samoa Joe, CM Punk. I remember seeing CM Punk, man, and nobody, I mean, it was like 50 people, and it was the same CM Punk putting on his entire heart into it. This is your chance to see incredible wrestling, and also support people learning the craft. It's a great place. And I still argue it's the biggest bang for your entertainment buck that you're probably going to get anywhere else. And, I will tell you this, you're going to spend more on popcorn in a movie theater than you will for a ticket, popcorn, and maybe some candy at an independent show. So
That's
you
true.
can go and have a much longer time, and you get to yell, maybe like Dave, till you bleed from the throat, and yell at people and let them know whatever it is, and have a great time. And who knows, maybe after one of those shows, you're on Wrestling with Randomness, talking about your own journey in wrestling, your own fandom, and who knows what happens after that. I know certainly Dave has had one of the biggest rides of anyone, well beyond his imagination, and it's an inspiration, should be an inspiration to everyone listening, that regardless of your age, regardless of your journey, the dreams that you had early on, just because it's delayed doesn't mean it has to be denied. your dream can still happen. Dave is a living, breathing example of a dream delayed is not a dream denied. Dave, I want to thank you, man, for coming on Wrestling with Randomness, taking the time. I know you spent way more time than what you had committed to originally. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate what you're doing with AFS. I appreciate what you're doing on your podcast, giving other people a chance to move on. And it just means so much, man. This means a lot to me personally. I value our friendship and our relationship. Is there anything else you want to close out with, man, or share?
Just our YouTube channel, Tim. I thank you so much for having me on here. You can have as much time for me. I've got all the time in the world for you, sir. I thank the world of you, and I can't thank you enough for having me on today. I do want to tell everybody about our YouTube channel. We broadcast our show live weekly. Most of the time we do it Wednesday, 6 p.m. Central. We may switch it to 7 p.m. Central so we can work dinner in before. Some weeks we go to Thursday, depending on availability of guests, and and AEW comes on, so sometimes that causes causes conflict sometimes. But if you go to our YouTube channel, Talking Wrestling with Pondwater Dave, you can find it by www.thepondwaterdaveshow.com. And I'm thinking I'm going to get another URL that's easier to work with. But if you would go to our YouTube page, please subscribe. We need subscribers. We're really trying to put all of our eggs in the YouTube basket because we like doing the live version. We do the audio version. You can get it anywhere. You can get it on your Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Google, anywhere that you get your podcast, you can find our show. We're building a little momentum. We're really excited. We're Amy and Justin and myself. We're 42 episodes in. We're starting to really click. We're comfortable with each other now. Forgive Amy because she's a bit of the potty mouth and degenerate of the bunch. Who would have known on my show that I'm not the one?
Well, I'll tell you what, I listen to it. I subscribe to it. And when she goes a little bit of potty mouth, don't worry. If you're a very religious person and you're worried about that, it's like I said, I've said this about a couple other podcasts I listen to. Sometimes when it goes that direction, you just remind yourself it's helping me get closer to God, because then I have to go to him and ask for forgiveness for listening to
Amy
it.
lights a candle at church every week for us.
There you go.
And this is what, in fact, last time I saw her, she gave me 2.
There you go, man. I'll tell you, I subscribe and just, I think what happens, one of the things I love about our community is how much we support each other and root for each other and try to just cheer each other on. And Dave, that's, man, just thank you, dude. I truly do.
We wish you the best with your venture here. And once you get rolling, please come on and let's let my audience see if we can make my audience your audience too.
Again, I want to say a big thanks to Pondwater Dave, Super Dave, or just simply Dave Miller for joining us on this podcast. I sincerely hope you enjoyed it, and it gave you a unique insight, not only into Dave's life, but also into what it's like to be an independent referee, as well as a referee on a large stage. As I was reflecting back on the fact that Dave was the man who, calls the final 1, 2, 3 on the Nature Boy Ric Flair's career. And I know Dave, has so many other things that he's doing and continuing on. He even admitted that, he is kind of the answer to a obscure trivia question. But I started thinking just about life as a whole. And I want to leave you with a final thought. If you ever read the scripture of the Bible, especially the New Testament, in the book of Romans, it was written by a man named Paul. They call him the Apostle Paul. And he writes down one of the most beautifully written realities about God, especially when we begin to think about our own mortality, the end of our life, or the end of even just a season of our life. And maybe you're facing the end of a particular era or part of your life. Maybe it was a job that came to an end, a relationship that came to an end, the loss of a loved one, whatever it may be. The Apostle Paul writes some really encouraging words, and I want to leave you with them. It's found in Romans chapter 8 and verse 38, 39. He writes these words: For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus, our Lord. And there's a lot of times I have to lean into that, especially during bad days or when something negative is happening. I have to remind myself, and today I want to remind you that there is a God that loves you with an everlasting love. He always has, he always will. Whether you believe in him or not, whether you serve him or not, doesn't change the reality that he loves you and he is with you. Nothing will separate you from his love, and there's nothing that you have done, can do, or will do that will make God love you any less. He loves you everlasting. Thanks for joining again with Wrestling with Randomness. I encourage you, join the congregation by hitting the like, subscribe button, whatever it is. Thanks for just listening to the show, and I look forward to hanging out with you again on the next episode that's coming up. It's going to be a lot of fun. You want to reach out on one of the social media platforms at WWR Show. And until next time.